The sound of gunfire echoed through the night as Maribel Thompson fled into the darkness, her heart pounding against her ribs like a wild Mustang. Blood stained her torn dress, not her own, but her husband's splattered across the fabric as a permanent reminder of what she had done to survive. She had never meant to kill him, but after years of his fists and threats, the pistol had found its way into her trembling hands. Now, as the moon cast long shadows across the California desert, Maribel knew there would be no going back to the life she once had in San Francisco. The year was 1878, and the frontier offered both danger and possibility for a woman alone. Maribel had nothing but the clothes on her back, her mother's silver locket around her neck, and $20 sewn into the hem of her skirt. It would have to be enough to start anew, far from the whispers and accusations that would surely follow once Lawrence's body was discovered. For 3 days and nights she traveled south, hitching rides on supply wagons when fortune smiled upon her and walking until her feet blistered when it did not. The June heat was merciless, beating down on her fair skin until it reddened and peeled. Water became more precious than gold, each sip carefully rationed as she pushed onward. On the 4th day, as the sun reached its zenith in the cloudless sky, Maribel crested a hill and saw the scattered buildings of a small settlement nestled in a valley below. The sign, weathered by sun and sand, reads San Bernardino, California. Hope flickered in her chest. Perhaps here she could disappear, become someone new before her past caught up with her. The town was larger than she had expected, with a proper main street lined with businesses. The railroad had brought prosperity to San Bernardino, evident in the newly constructed buildings that stood alongside older adobe structures from the Mexican era. Miners, ranchers, merchants, and families created a bustling atmosphere that allowed Maribel to slip into town unnoticed, just another dusty traveler seeking opportunity or escape. She made her way to the only establishment that might provide immediate work for a woman without references: the Silver Spur Saloon. The piano music spilled out onto the street, along with raucous laughter and the clink of glasses. Maribel smoothed her hair, straightened her posture, and stepped through the swinging doors. The air inside was thick with tobacco smoke and the smell of whiskey. Men turned to look at the newcomer, their gazes lingering longer than was proper. Maribel kept her eyes fixed on the bar where a heavy-set man with a waxed mustache was pouring drinks. "I'm looking for work," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. The barkeep looked her up and down, his expression calculating. "We don't need no more girls for upstairs entertainment, if that's what you're asking." Maribel's cheeks flushed. "I can serve drinks, clean, cook if needed. I don't do that sort of work," he laughed, a short bark that carried no humor. "Everyone's got to eat, miss. But we could use a girl to serve drinks and keep the boys happy with a smile. Nothing more required unless you choose it. Pays fair, room upstairs included." It wasn't ideal, but it was shelter and income. Maribel nodded. "When can I start?" "Right now, I'm Hank. What do I call you?" She hesitated for only a moment. Mary Turner." The lie came easily, a new name for her new life. Hank introduced her to the other girls, Betsy and Pearl, who eyed her with suspicion but helped her find a clean apron and showed her which customers to avoid and which were reliable tippers. By midnight, Maribel's feet ached worse than they had from walking, and her forced smile had become a grimace, but her apron pocket jingled with coins. It was a beginning. For 2 weeks, Maribel, now married to everyone in San Bernardino, served drinks, dodged wandering hands, and kept to herself. She learned the rhythms of the town, the names of regular customers, and which local women viewed the saloon girls with disdain. She saved every penny she could, knowing that San Bernardino was merely a stopping point. Eventually, she would need to move on, further from San Francisco and the specter of Lawrence's death. It was on a sweltering afternoon when she first saw him, a tall cowboy with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. He stood out among the usual crowd, not just for his imposing height, but for the quiet way he carried himself. No unnecessary movements, no boasting or carousing. He sat at a corner table, nursed a single whiskey, and observed the room with the awareness of a man accustomed to watching his back. "Who is that?" Maribel asked Pearl as they collected empty glasses. Pearl followed her gaze. "Zeke Valero, owns the Double V Ranch about 10 miles out, keeps to himself mostly but fair with his men and pays his debts. Not the type you want to cross, though." "Why's that?" "Rumor has it he rode with some rough outfits before settling here. Nothing proven, but men give him a wide berth. Smart ones do anyway." Throughout the evening, Maribel found herself glancing toward his table. Once she caught him watching her, his expression unreadable. He tipped his hat slightly, a gesture so subtle she might have imagined it. When he left, he placed a silver dollar on the table, far more than his drink had cost. The following evening, Zeke Valero returned to the Silver Spur. This time he sat at the bar and Maribel found herself serving him directly. "Evening, Miss Turner," he said, his voice deep and quiet. Maribel nearly dropped the glass she was placing before him. "You know my name?" A slight smile curved his lips. "Small town. Word gets around when a new face appears. And your name is Valero, Zeke Valero." He inclined his head. "Seems we're acquainted without being introduced. That's the nature of places like this, I suppose. You're not from around here." It wasn't a question. Maribel stiffened. "Lots of people come west looking for a fresh start. Indeed they do." He studied her with those intense gray eyes. "Some are running to something, others are running from something. Which are you, Miss Turner?" "I don't see how that's any concern of yours, Mr. Valero." She turned to serve another customer, but his voice stopped her. No offense meant, just making conversation. When she returned, he had another question. "You planning to make serving drinks your life's work?" Maribel frowned. "Are you implying there's something wrong with honest labor?" "Not at all, just wondering if you've considered other possibilities." "Like what? Being someone's wife, or working upstairs as they call it?" Zeke shook his head. "I'm looking for a housekeeper at my ranch. Previous one moved to Oregon with her son. It's decent work, away from," he gestured around the saloon, "all this." Maribel regarded him suspiciously. "And why would you offer such a position to a woman you've barely spoken to? You carry yourself with dignity despite your surroundings. You're clearly educated from your speech. And Hank says you're the most honest employee he's had. Haven't skimmed a cent from the till." He shrugged. "I need someone reliable. You seem to fit the bill." "I don't know the first thing about keeping house on a ranch. It's not so different from anywhere else. Cook for me and the foreman, keep the place clean, do some mending. Pays better than here, and you'd have your own cabin, small but private." The offer was tempting escape from the saloon, from the constant vigilance required to fend off unwanted advances, from the fear that someone from San Francisco might wander in and recognize her. But could she trust this stranger with the storm-gray eyes? "I'll think about it," she said finally. Zeke nodded, finished his drink, and left another silver dollar. "I'll be back in town on Saturday. If you're interested, I'll be at the general store at noon." For 3 days, Maribel debated the offer. Pearl warned her against it. Men like that always want more than housekeeping. While Betsy thought she was crazy to hesitate, a chance to get out of this place? "I'd take it in a heartbeat." Hank grumbled that good help was hard to find when she tentatively mentioned she might be leaving. By Saturday morning, Maribel had made her decision. She gathered her meager belongings now, including a second dress purchased with her earnings, and walked to the general store just before noon. Zeke Valero was there, loading supplies into a wagon. He looked up as she approached, and something like satisfaction flashed across his features. "Miss Turner," he acknowledged, "your offer, is it still open?" "It is." "Then I accept, Mr. Valero, though I should warn you my cooking skills are limited." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Can't be worse than what I manage. And call me Zeke. Mr. Valero makes me look around for my father." The ride to the Double V Ranch was mostly silent. Maribel watched as the town gave way to open country rocky hills covered with scrub brush and scattered oaks. The summer heat shimmered off the distant mountains, creating mirages on the horizon. Occasionally, Zeke would point out landmarks or boundaries of his property, but he didn't press her for conversation. As they crested a rise, the ranch came into view. A substantial main house built of timber and adobe stood in the center, with a barn, bunkhouse, and several smaller structures arranged around it. A corral held several fine-looking horses, and cattle dotted the hillsides in the distance. It was larger and more prosperous than Maribel had expected. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Zeke glanced at her, something unreadable in his expression. "Been building it up for 8 years, started with nothing but dust and dreams. You've accomplished a great deal. There's always more to do." He showed her to a small cabin about 50 yards from the main house. It was simple but clean, with a narrow bed, a table with 2 chairs, a chest of drawers, and a small stove for winter heating. "It's not much, but it's private," Zeke said. "Main house has the kitchen where you'll be working. I'll introduce you to Miguel, my foreman, only other person who eats at the house regular. Rest of the hands take meals at the bunkhouse, handled by Cookie." "How many men work here?" "8 full-time, more during roundup and branding." "Good men, all of them, but you come to me if anyone gives you trouble." Maribel nodded, suddenly aware of how isolated she was. If this man or any of his workers had ill intentions, who would hear her scream? But something in Zeke's straightforward manner reassured her. He didn't leer or stand too close. His eyes, when they met hers, were clear and direct. "I'll leave you to settle in. Supper's usually at 6, nothing fancy needed." As Zeke walked away, Maribel sat on the edge of the bed, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake or found a sanctuary. Only time would tell. The first weeks at the Double V were a steep learning curve for Maribel. She rose before dawn to start the kitchen fire, learned to make coffee strong enough to satisfy cowboys without being thick enough to stand a spoon in, and discovered that ranch men were far less particular about food than city folk as long as there was plenty of it. Miguel Sanchez, the foreman, was a quiet Mexican man in his 40s who treated her with formal respect. He had been with Zeke since the beginning, and his loyalty to the rancher was evident in everything he did. Gradually, he began teaching Maribel Spanish phrases and telling her stories about the early days of the ranch, when Zeke had camped under the stars with nothing but determination and a small herd to his name. Zeke himself remained something of a mystery. He ate what she prepared with appreciation but few words, disappeared for long days working with the cattle or horses, and sometimes sat on his porch late into the night, smoking a pipe and staring at the stars. He never mentioned her past or asked why she had come to San Bernardino. For that, Maribel was grateful. One evening in late July, as Maribel was hanging laundry to dry, she heard hoofbeats approaching rapidly. Shading her eyes against the setting sun, she saw 2 riders coming hard toward the house. One was slumped over his saddle, clearly injured. She ran toward the main house, calling for Zeke. He emerged from the barn, took one look at the approaching riders, and shouted for Miguel. Within moments, they were helping the injured man, one of the ranch hands named Tom, down from his horse. "What happened?" Zeke demanded of the other rider. "Rustlers," the man panted. "Caught them trying to drive off the south herd. Tom took a bullet when we confronted them." Zeke's face hardened into something dangerous. "How many?" "4 that we saw. They headed east toward the canyon. Miguel, gather the men, armed and ready in 5 minutes." Zeke turned to Maribel. "Can you tend to Tom? Bullet went through his shoulder, clean by the looks of it, but needs washing and binding." Maribel swallowed hard. "Yes, I can manage." As the men prepared to ride out, Maribel helped Tom into the house and laid him on the kitchen table. His face was gray with pain and blood loss, but he managed a weak smile. "Sorry for the trouble, Miss Turner." "Hush now," she said, cutting away his shirt to expose the wound. "Save your strength." The bullet had indeed passed through the fleshy part of his shoulder, missing bone and major vessels. Still, it was bleeding heavily and already showing signs of infection. Maribel heated water, found whiskey to clean the wound, and tore clean sheets into bandages. As she worked, memories flooded back Lawrence, bleeding on the floor, her hands covered in his blood as she tried desperately to undo what she had done before realizing it was too late. "Miss Turner, you all right?" Tom's voice snapped her back to the present. "Yes, I'm fine." "This will hurt," she warned, pouring whiskey over the wound. Tom's scream echoed through the house, but Maribel didn't falter. She cleaned both entry and exit wounds thoroughly, packed them with clean cloth, and bound his shoulder tightly. When she was done, she helped him drink water mixed with more whiskey for the pain. "You've done this before," he observed as she wiped blood from her hands. Maribel stiffened. "My father was a doctor," she lied. In truth, she had learned about treating wounds during her marriage, patching herself up after Lawrence's rages. It was well after midnight when Zeke and the others returned. Maribel had moved Tom to a cot in the main house and was dozing in a chair nearby when the door opened. Zeke's face was streaked with dust and something darker that might have been blood. "How is he?" Zeke asked quietly. "Sleeping now, fever's slight. I think he'll recover if infection doesn't set in." Zeke nodded, his expression grim. "You did well. And the rustlers." Something cold flashed in his eyes. "Won't be bothering us again." The words sent a chill through Maribel. Had he killed them? She didn't ask, and he didn't elaborate. "You should get some rest," he said. "I'll watch him for a while." Maribel hesitated. "There's stew on the stove. You should eat." A flicker of surprise crossed his face, followed by something softer. "Thank you." As August turned to September, life at the Double V settled into a comfortable routine. Tom recovered from his wound and returned to work. The cattle grew fat on summer grass, and preparations began for the fall roundup. Maribel found herself adapting to ranch life more easily than she had expected. Her cooking improved, her hands grew calloused from work, and her skin darkened under the California sun. She also found herself watching Zeke more than was proper. The way his strong hands gentled when handling a young colt, how his rare smile transformed his stern face into something almost boyish. The respect his men showed him not from fear, but from loyalty earned through fair treatment and shared hardship. One evening, as Maribel was returning to her cabin after serving dinner, Zeke called her to the porch where he sat with his customary pipe. "Sit a spell," he said, indicating the empty chair beside him. "Night's too fine to waste indoors." Maribel hesitated, then settled into the chair. The stars were indeed spectacular, a vast canopy of silver against the black velvet of the desert sky. "I wanted to thank you," Zeke said after a comfortable silence. "Place runs smoother since you came. I'm just doing what you hired me to do. You do more than that. The men work better when they're well fed. House feels like a home now, not just a place to sleep." Maribel didn't know how to respond to such praise. "I'm grateful for the opportunity." Another silence fell, broken only by the distant howl of a coyote and the soft glow of Zeke's pipe as he drew on it. "Fall roundup starts next week," he said finally. "Be busy times. More men around, longer hours. I'll prepare extra food." "That's not," Zeke seemed uncharacteristically hesitant. "What I mean is, I won't be around much to keep an eye on things. Some of the extra hands don't know you, might not show proper respect. I can handle myself, Zeke." He studied her face in the moonlight. "I believe you can, but I'd still rest easier knowing you were carrying protection." He reached into his pocket and produced a small revolver, offering it to her butt first. "It's loaded. Do you know how to use it?" Maribel took the gun, its weight familiar and terrible in her hand. "Yes," she said quietly, "I know how." If Zeke wondered about her experience with firearms, he didn't ask. Instead, he nodded with approval. "Good. Hopefully you'll never need it." The next day brought unexpected visitors to the Double V. Maribel was in the kitchen, kneading dough for the evening bread when she heard horses in the yard. Peering through the window, she saw 3 men dismounting, 2 wearing badges that caught the sunlight. Her heart seized with fear. Had they come for her? Had someone from San Francisco tracked her down? She considered fleeing out the back door but knew she wouldn't get far. Besides, running would only confirm her guilt. Instead, she wiped her hands on her apron and tried to compose herself as Zeke greeted the visitors on the porch. "Sheriff Caldwell," she heard him say. "What brings you out this way?" "Just making the rounds before roundup season, Valero, checking in with all the ranches." The sheriff was a barrel-chested man with a gray streaked beard. "This here's Deputy Finch and Mr. Wallace from the California State Bank. Gentlemen," Zeke's tone was polite but guarded, "come inside out of the sun. Mary can bring coffee." Maribel busied herself with the coffee pot as the men entered, keeping her face turned away from the visitors. She served the coffee with downcast eyes, hoping the sheriff wouldn't look too closely at her. "You've got a new housekeeper," the sheriff observed. "Don't believe we've met, miss." "Mary Turner," Maribel said softly, forcing herself to meet his eyes briefly. "I've only been in the area a few months." The sheriff nodded without particular interest, and Maribel retreated to the kitchen, leaving the door ajar so she could hear their conversation. "We're here about more than just a social call," the banker Wallace was saying. "There's been a series of bank robberies across Southern California, 3 in the past 2 months, moving steadily eastward." "What's that got to do with me?" Zeke's voice had a dangerous edge. "Nothing directly," the sheriff said hastily, "but the gang is believed to be hiding out between jobs somewhere in this region, 4 or 5 men led by someone calling himself the Phantom." "Theatrical name," Zeke commented dryly. "He's earned it." "No one's got a good description, wears a mask, changes his appearance, but he's dangerous. Killed 2 guards in San Diego. I still don't see what this has to do with my ranch. We're asking all the large landowners to keep an eye out," Wallace explained. "Report any strangers in the area, especially groups of men with unexplained cash or no clear business." "I mind my affairs, Sheriff. Expect others to do the same." "Just doing our job, Valero," the sheriff said, a note of warning in his voice. "Some folks remember when you rode with the Hayes gang back in '68, makes them wonder if old connections might resurface." There was a long silence, during which Maribel held her breath. "That was a lifetime ago," Zeke finally said, his voice dangerously soft. "I paid my debt to society." 5 years in Yuma prison tends to sever old connections. Maribel nearly dropped the cup she was drying. Zeke had been an outlaw, had served time in prison. The revelation shouldn't have shocked her. Pearl had hinted at her rough past, but somehow it did. "No offense meant," the sheriff backpedaled. "Just want everyone alert. Bank in San Bernardino could be a target." The visitors left soon after, and Maribel pretended to be absorbed in her bread making when Zeke entered the kitchen. She could feel his eyes on her back, assessing. "How much did you hear?" he asked bluntly. Maribel turned to face him. "Enough." Zeke's jaw tightened. "I was young and stupid once, rode with bad men, made poor choices, did my time and started fresh." "I don't require explanations," Maribel said carefully. "Maybe not, but I'd rather you hear it from me than through gossip." He leaned against the doorframe, his eyes never leaving her face. "I was 18 when I fell in with the Hayes gang. Thought I was invincible. We robbed stage coaches mostly, then a bank in Arizona. Got caught, spent 5 years in Yuma prison. When I got out, I worked honest jobs until I had enough to buy a small herd in this land." Maribel studied him, this man with shadows in his past who had offered her sanctuary without questions. "We all have things we regret, Zeke." Something shifted in his expression, recognition, perhaps, of the weight behind her words. "Some more than others. Do the men know about your past?" Miguel does. "The others suspect, probably. Men with clean pasts don't usually end up building ranches in remote country." Maribel nodded slowly. "Thank you for telling me." Zeke pushed away from the doorframe. "Now you know the worst of me. Figured you deserved that much." As he walked away, Maribel thought of the blood on her own hands, the secret she still kept. If he had shown her his darkness, could she someday show him hers? The fall roundup transformed the Double V. Additional cowhands arrived from neighboring ranches to help, the bunkhouse overflowed, and makeshift camps dotted the property. From dawn until dusk, men rode the range, gathering cattle, branding calves born since the spring, and separating those ready for market. Maribel rose before dawn each day to prepare massive breakfasts for the working men and packed food for those who wouldn't return until nightfall. The small revolver Zeke had given her remained tucked in her apron pocket, a constant reminder of potential dangers and her own violent past. Most of the extra hands treated her with respect or indifference, but a surly cowboy named Paxton made her uncomfortable with his lingering looks and suggestive comments. She avoided him when possible and kept her responses to his remarks clipped and professional. On the 4th night of roundup, Maribel was returning to her cabin after cleaning up the evening meal when Paxton stepped out from behind the woodpile, blocking her path. She could smell whiskey on his breath even from several feet away. "Evening, Miss Turner," he slurred. Mighty lonely night for a pretty lady to be walking alone. Maribel's hand slipped into her pocket, fingers closing around the revolver. "Mr. Paxton, you're drunk. Go back to the bunkhouse before you do something foolish." He took a step closer. "Don't be unfriendly now." "Just thought we could get better acquainted. Valero can't keep you all to himself." "Mr. Valero is my employer, nothing more, and I'm not interested in getting acquainted with you or anyone else." Paxton's face darkened. Mighty high and mighty for a woman working as a servant. "What you do before this, huh? Bet you weren't so particular back then." "Step aside," Maribel said firmly, drawing the revolver and pointing it at his chest. "Now," Paxton's eyes widened, then narrowed dangerously. "You wouldn't dare use that." "I've killed before," Maribel said, the truth slipping out before she could stop it. "I won't hesitate to do it again if necessary." Something in her voice or expression must have convinced him, because Paxton raised his hands and stepped back. "No need for that. Just making friendly conversation is all. Find someone else to be friendly with." He spat on the ground near her feet and stalked away, muttering obscenities under his breath. Maribel waited until he disappeared into the darkness before lowering the gun, her hands trembling with reaction. The confrontation had been minor compared to what she had endured with Lawrence, but it left her shaken nonetheless. She didn't tell Zeke about the incident, knowing it would only create trouble during the already tense roundup. But the next morning, she noticed Paxton loading his gear onto his horse while Miguel watched with arms crossed. "What happened?" she asked Cookie, the bunkhouse cook, when he came to the main house for supplies. "Paxton's been let go," Cookie said, shaking his head. "Boss found out he was drinking on the job and threatening one of the younger hands. Zero tolerance for that kind of behavior, especially during roundup." Maribel wondered if Paxton had mentioned their encounter, but decided it didn't matter. He was gone, and she was safe for now. The roundup concluded successfully, with a substantial herd selected for the drive to the railroad stockyards in San Bernardino. Zeke would lead the drive himself, leaving Miguel to manage the ranch during his absence. The night before his departure, Zeke lingered after dinner, helping Maribel clear the table in a break from his usual habits. "I'll be gone about a week," he said, drying a plate she had washed. "Miguel will look after things here. I know, you told me at breakfast." "Right." He seemed uncharacteristically hesitant. "Just wanted to make sure you'll be all right." Maribel glanced at him, surprised by the concern in his voice. "I'll be fine, Zeke. The ranch will still be standing when you return." He nodded, set down the dish towel, and reached into his pocket. "Got something for you. Was going to wait until Christmas, but—" He handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. Maribel dried her hands and took it, surprise rendering her momentarily speechless. Carefully unwrapping the paper, she found a beautiful silver hair comb adorned with turquoise stones. "It's beautiful," she breathed, running her finger over the smooth stones. "Saw it in town last month. Reminded me of your eyes." Zeke looked almost embarrassed by his admission. Maribel felt warmth spread through her chest at his thoughtfulness. "Thank you. I've never had anything so fine." "You deserve fine things, Mary." The use of her assumed name was a sharp reminder of the lies between them, but his sincerity was unmistakable. Before she could respond, he turned and walked out, leaving Maribel staring after him, the comb clutched in her hand and confusion in her heart. The week of Zeke's absence passed slowly. Maribel found herself watching the road for his return more often than she would admit. The ranch seemed emptier without his quiet presence, though Miguel kept everything running smoothly. She wore the silver comb every day, its weight against her head a constant reminder of the man who had given it to her. On the 6th day, Maribel was hanging laundry when she heard a wagon approaching. Expecting to see Zeke returning with the proceeds from the cattle sale, she was surprised to find a different vehicle coming up the drive, a smart buggy driven by a well-dressed woman with a young boy beside her. Miguel emerged from the barn, looking equally confused by the unexpected visitors. He helped the woman down from the buggy while Maribel approached, curiosity overcoming her usual caution around strangers. "Good afternoon," the woman said, her accent refined and Eastern. I'm looking for Mr. Zachariah Valero. Maribel felt a jolt at hearing Zeke's full name for the first time. He's not here at present. He's in San Bernardino on business but expected back tomorrow. I'm Mary Turner, the housekeeper. The woman's perfectly arched eyebrows rose slightly. A housekeeper? Well, that's progress, I suppose. I'm Victoria Harrington, and this is my son, Benjamin. The boy, who appeared to be about 10, nodded politely but remained silent, studying the ranch with obvious interest. Mr. Valero is my brother-in-law, Victoria continued. My late husband, Charles, was his half-brother. I've written to Zachariah several times about visiting, but he's never responded. Finally, I decided to come anyway. We've traveled all the way from Boston. Maribel was stunned. In all the months she had been at the Double V, Zeke had never mentioned having family. I'm sure he'll be surprised to see you. Would you like to come inside for refreshment after your journey? Miguel can see to your horses. Victoria accepted the invitation with the air of someone conferring a favor. As they walked to the house, she cast appraising glances at the buildings and grounds. He's done well for himself, I see. Charles always said Zachariah had potential if he could stay on the right side of the law. Maribel bristled at the condescension in the woman's tone, but kept her expression neutral. Mr. Valero has built this ranch through hard work and determination. It's one of the most respected in the region. Inside, Maribel served coffee to Victoria and milk with cookies to Benjamin, who had begun to relax and look around with more open curiosity. Have you worked for my uncle long, Miss Turner? He asked politely. Since summer, Maribel replied with a smile, and you may call me Mary. Do you like it here? It seems awfully empty compared to Boston. I find it beautiful. There's a kind of freedom in the open spaces. Victoria interrupted their exchange. I must say I'm surprised Zachariah has a proper housekeeper. When Charles last saw him years ago, he was living like a savage, barely better than the Indians. Maribel's smile tightened. Mr. Valero maintains a comfortable, respectable home. Perhaps your late husband visited before the ranch was fully established. Perhaps. Victoria sipped her coffee. In any case, I've come with a proposition for him. Benjamin is growing up without a male influence, and his schooling in Boston has been disrupted by certain unfortunate incidents. I believe a few months in the wholesome atmosphere of the West might be beneficial to his character development. Benjamin studied his milk with sudden intense interest, his shoulders hunching slightly. I see, Maribel said carefully. And what does Mr. Valero's opinion matter in this plan? He is the boy's uncle and has certain familial obligations. Besides, the ranch will someday pass to Benjamin as Zachariah's nearest male relative. It's time they became acquainted. The presumptuous statement left Maribel momentarily speechless. This woman had appeared unannounced after years of no contact, expecting Zeke to take responsibility for a nephew he had never met, based on a relationship with a half-brother who, by all appearances, had not been close to him. Before she could form a diplomatic response, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. Maribel moved to the window and felt her heart lift at the sight of Zeke riding into the yard, followed by several of his men. The cattle drive had returned early. It seems Mr. Valero has arrived, she said, trying to keep the relief from her voice. If you'll excuse me, I'll let him know you're here. Maribel hurried outside, meeting Zeke as he dismounted. His face brightened at the sight of her, then quickly turned concerned as he registered her expression. What's wrong? He asked quietly. You have visitors, Maribel explained swiftly. Victoria Harrington and her son Benjamin. She says she's your late brother's wife from Boston. Zeke's face hardened, all warmth vanishing. Half-brother, he corrected, and I haven't seen Charles in 15 years, didn't even know he was dead. She says she's written to you, never got any letters. He looked past her to the house, his expression unreadable. What does she want? To leave her son with you for character development, apparently, and she mentioned something about him being your heir. A muscle ticked in Zeke's jaw. Did she now? Well, let's not keep the lady waiting. The reunion was strained, to put it mildly. Victoria greeted Zeke with artificial warmth, while he remained cool and formal. Benjamin watched the adults warily, saying little. Maribel prepared dinner for them all, serving in the dining room rather than the kitchen for the first time since her arrival at the ranch. It was quite a shock to learn of Charles's passing, Zeke said during the meal. When did this happen? 2 years ago, Victoria replied. Pneumonia took him after a brief illness. I wrote to you at the time. Mail can be unreliable out here, Zeke said neutrally. Indeed. Well, it's water under the bridge now. The important matter is Benjamin's future. Without a father's guidance, he's begun to show concerning behaviors at his school in Boston. The boy stared at his plate, cheeks flushed with embarrassment. What kind of behaviors? Zeke asked. Fighting, disrespect for authority, association with unsuitable companions. His headmaster suggested a change of environment might be beneficial. Zeke looked at Benjamin, his expression softening slightly. That true, boy, you've been causing trouble. Benjamin met his uncle's eyes for the first time. Tommy Aldrich said my father died because he was weak. I broke his nose. A flicker of approval crossed Zeke's face before he masked it. I see. The point is, Victoria continued, I believe a few months in the wholesome environment of the West under masculine influence would be advantageous for Benjamin's development, and it would give you an opportunity to know your heir. I wasn't aware I needed an heir, Zeke said dryly. I'm only 35. Nevertheless, family responsibility, let's be clear, Victoria. Charles and I shared a father who showed little interest in either of us. We weren't close. I'm sorry for your loss, but I don't recall agreeing to raise his son. Victoria's smile turned brittle. I'm not suggesting you raise him. Merely that he spend the winter here, learning the value of hard work and discipline. I would return for him in the spring. And where will you be during this time? I have a European tour planned. It's been arranged for months: Paris, Rome, Vienna. Surely you can see the benefit to everyone. Benjamin learns responsibility. I enjoy my long-delayed travels without worry, and you become acquainted with your only living family. Zeke looked at Benjamin again, who was watching him with a mixture of apprehension and hope. What do you say to this plan, Benjamin? Do you want to stay here? The boy straightened in his chair. Yes, sir, I'd like to learn about ranching, and I won't be any trouble. Something in the boy's earnest expression seemed to reach Zeke. He nodded slowly. All right. He can stay until spring. But this is a working ranch, not a holiday camp. He'll be expected to contribute and follow rules. Victoria beamed. Excellent, I knew you'd see reason, Zachariah. Now, I'll need to return to San Bernardino tomorrow to catch the train. Is there somewhere in town I can stay tonight? You're welcome to use the guest room here, Maribel offered, ignoring Zeke's sharp glance. It's simple but comfortable. And so it was arranged. Victoria would depart the following day, leaving Benjamin in their care for the winter months. As Maribel prepared the guest room, she wondered how this unexpected development would affect life at the Double V and her evolving relationship with Zeke. Late that night, unable to sleep, Maribel stepped outside her cabin for some air. The night was cool, stars brilliant overhead in the clear desert sky. She was surprised to see a light still burning on the main house porch, and even more surprised to find Zeke sitting there alone, a glass of whiskey in his hand. Can't sleep, he asked as she approached. Too much on my mind, she admitted, taking the seat beside him. You, same, he offered her his glass, which she declined with a shake of her head. You never mentioned having family, Maribel said after a comfortable silence. Never thought of Charles as family, not really. Different mothers, different lives. He was raised in Boston society. I grew up in Texas dirt. Zeke took a swallow of whiskey. Last time I saw him was after I got out of prison. He offered me money to stay away from the Valero name to avoid embarrassing him. Did you take it? No. Told him I'd make my own way. Never heard from him again until today, apparently. The boy seems different from his mother. Less entitled, Zeke nodded. Got a look in his eyes I recognize. Boy who doesn't quite fit where he's been placed. You don't have to keep him, you know. It's a lot to ask of someone you've never met. I know. He stared out into the darkness. But maybe it's a chance to do something good. Boy needs guidance, not punishment for defending his father's memory. Maribel smiled softly. You're a good man, Zeke Valero. He looked at her then, his eyes reflecting the lantern light. Not always, but I'm trying to be. On impulse, Maribel reached out and placed her hand over his. That's all any of us can do. For a moment they sat in silence, her hand on his, the night wrapping around them like a blanket. Then, slowly, Zeke turned his palm upward, entwining his fingers with hers. The simple gesture felt more intimate than any embrace, a quiet acknowledgement of growing feelings neither was ready to name. When Victoria departed the next morning, Benjamin watched her buggy disappear down the road with a stoicism that spoke volumes about their relationship. Once she was gone, Zeke placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Ever ridden a horse, Benjamin?" "No, sir. Mother says they're dangerous." "Out here they're necessary. And my name's Zeke, not sir. Let's find you a gentle one to start with." Thus began Benjamin's integration into ranch life. Zeke assigned him simple chores appropriate to his age and strength, and Miguel taught him to ride on an old mare with infinite patience. Maribel took charge of his education, setting aside time each day for reading, writing, and arithmetic using books Victoria had left. To everyone's surprise, Benjamin thrived in the structured environment of the ranch. He was intelligent and eager to learn, soaking up knowledge about cattle, horses, and the land like a sponge. His city pallor gave way to a healthy tan, and his previously guarded demeanor relaxed into occasional boyish enthusiasm. "He's a good kid," Zeke remarked to Maribel one evening as they watched Benjamin practice his roping skills on a wooden post. "Just needed room to breathe." "You're good with him," Maribel observed. "Patient, firm when needed, but never harsh," Zeke shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Just treating him the way I wished someone had treated me at his age." As October gave way to November, the ranch prepared for winter. Though San Bernardino's climate was milder than many parts of the country, the nights grew cold and occasional storms swept down from the mountains. Cattle were moved to sheltered pastures, buildings were reinforced, and supplies were stockpiled against potential isolation. Maribel found herself increasingly drawn to Zeke. Their evening conversations on the porch had become a cherished ritual, a time when the day's work was done and they could simply enjoy each other's company. Sometimes they talked about the ranch, about Benjamin's progress, about books Maribel had read or places Zeke had seen. Other times they sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars or listening to the coyotes' distant songs. Never did they speak of their pasts beyond the most general details, yet Maribel felt Zeke knew her better than anyone ever had, including Lawrence. He saw her strength, her intelligence, her determination, qualities Lawrence had sought to crush. And she saw beyond Zeke's stern exterior to the thoughtful, honorable man beneath, a man who had made mistakes but had worked tirelessly to redeem himself. The first real storm of winter arrived in early December, bringing howling winds and driving rain that turned the ranch yard into a quagmire. Maribel had just finished securing the shutters on her cabin when she heard frantic shouting from the direction of the corrals. Wrapping her shawl tightly around her shoulders, she hurried toward the commotion to find several hands struggling with the horses, which were panicked by the thunder and lightning. Zeke was in the midst of it, trying to calm a particularly frightened stallion while shouting orders to the others. Benjamin stood nearby, watching with wide eyes, when a tremendous crack of lightning struck a tree just beyond the corral. The stallion reared in terror, breaking free from Zeke's grip. As the massive animal bolted, it charged directly toward where Benjamin stood frozen in fear. Without hesitation, Maribel ran forward, pushing Benjamin out of the path and falling to the ground with him as the stallion thundered past, missing them by inches. For a moment they lay in the mud, the boy's slight form shaking against hers. Then strong hands were lifting her, and she found herself looking into Zeke's frightened eyes. "Are you hurt, either of you?" he demanded, already checking Benjamin for injuries while keeping one hand firmly on Maribel's arm. "Just muddy," she assured him, her heart still racing. "Benjamin." The boy nodded shakily. "I'm all right, thanks to Miss Turner." Zeke's grip on her arm tightened momentarily, his eyes conveying what words couldn't: gratitude, relief, and something deeper that made Maribel's breath catch. Then he was pulling them both toward the house, away from the storm's fury. Inside, he sent Benjamin to change into dry clothes while Maribel built up the fire. When she turned from the hearth, she found Zeke watching her, his expression unreadable. "You could have been killed," he said quietly. "So could Benjamin." I reacted without thinking. "You risked your life for him. Any decent person would have done the same." Zeke shook his head. "Not everyone. Mary," he stopped, seeming to struggle with his words. "I don't know what I would have done if something had happened to either of you." The raw emotion in his voice made Maribel's heart constrict. She took a step toward him, then stopped as Benjamin returned to the room, now dry and eager to recount his near misadventure. The moment passed, but something had shifted between them, a recognition of feelings too strong to ignore much longer. As Christmas approached, a festive atmosphere descended on the ranch despite the continuing bad weather. Maribel decorated the main house with pine boughs and red ribbons, taught Benjamin to make paper snowflakes for the windows, and baked special treats that filled the house with tantalizing aromas. Even the ranch hands joined in the spirit, crafting small gifts for each other and singing carols in the bunkhouse after dinner. Zeke seemed bemused by the transformation, but made no objection. In fact, he disappeared into San Bernardino for a full day and returned with mysterious packages that he refused to explain, storing them in his private study until Christmas Day. On Christmas Eve, after Benjamin had gone to bed, Zeke invited Maribel to share a glass of wine by the fire in the main house. The room was warm and fragrant with pine, lit only by the fire and a few strategically placed candles. Outside, a gentle snow had begun to fall, rare for San Bernardino but perfectly timed for the holiday. "I've never seen the ranch looking so cheerful," Zeke commented, handing her a glass of rich red wine. "Is that a complaint?" Maribel teased, settling into the chair opposite his. "Not at all. It's nice. Reminds me of Christmas before my mother died when I was very young. Benjamin seems excited. I don't think he's had many proper family Christmases." Zeke nodded thoughtfully. "Victoria strikes me as the type to make the holiday more about appearances than warmth." He hesitated, then added, "Thank you for making it special for him." "It's special for me too," Maribel admitted. "Last Christmas was difficult." It was the closest she had come to mentioning her life before the double V, and Zeke seemed to recognize the significance. He studied her over his wineglass, his gray eyes reflecting the firelight. "Mary," he began, then corrected himself. "Or is it Mary, I mean?" Maribel froze, her glass halfway to her lips. "What do you mean? I've known for a while that you're running from something. Someone, perhaps." "I haven't asked because I figured it was your business to tell or keep private." He set his wine down and leaned forward. "But I find myself caring more than is wise about a woman whose real name I don't even know." The confession stunned her. She set her own glass down with trembling hands. "How did you know? Little things. The way you tense when strangers arrive, how you never talk about your past beyond vague generalities. The revolver you keep close, which you handle with the familiarity of someone who's used one before." His voice softened. "The sadness in your eyes sometimes when you think no one's looking." Maribel looked down at her hands, folded tightly in her lap. "You're right. Mary Turner isn't my real name. Will you tell me who you are?" "Not because you owe me an explanation, but because I'd like to know the woman I've come to care for." The moment of truth had arrived, sooner than she had expected, but perhaps not soon enough. Maribel took a deep breath, meeting his steady gaze. "My name is Maribel Thompson. 6 months ago, I lived in San Francisco with my husband, Lawrence." The words came slowly at first, then in a rush as the dam of silence finally broke. He was a successful businessman, respected in society. Behind closed doors, he was a monster. Zeke's expression darkened, but he remained silent, allowing her to continue. "For 3 years, I endured his beatings, his cruelty, his control. I tried to leave once, early in our marriage. He found me, brought me back, and broke my arm as punishment." Her voice grew stronger as she spoke, as if naming the horrors diminished their power. "The night I left for good, he was in one of his rages. He had been drinking heavily, accused me of looking at another man at a dinner party. He came at me with a fireplace poker." Maribel's hands were shaking now, but she forced herself to continue. "There was a pistol in his desk drawer. I'd seen him put it there many times. I got to it first. I only meant to threaten him to make him stop, but he laughed at me holding the gun and lunged forward. I pulled the trigger. She closed her eyes, remembering the deafening report, the spray of blood, Lawrence's expression of disbelief as he collapsed. He died there on our parlor floor. I ran, took what money I could find and fled south. I've been Mary Turner ever since, waiting for someone to recognize me, to accuse me of murder. When she opened her eyes, Zeke had moved to kneel before her chair. Gently, he took her trembling hands in his. It was self-defense, Maribel. Hearing her real name on his lips after so many months brought tears to her eyes. The law might not see it that way. There were no witnesses, and Lawrence had friends in high places. "Look at me," Zeke commanded softly, and when she did, the acceptance in his eyes nearly undid her. "I know something about mistakes and redemption. What you did wasn't even a mistake, it was survival. You're not a murderer." "How can you be so sure?" she whispered. "Because I know you, the woman who nurtures a boy who's not her own, who risks her life to save him without hesitation. Who treats every person on this ranch with dignity and kindness." His grip on her hands tightened. "That's not the heart of a killer." A sob escaped her then, the first she had allowed herself since that terrible night. Zeke moved to sit beside her on the wide chair, pulling her against his chest as tears flowed freely. He held her without speaking, one hand stroking her hair as years of fear and guilt poured out. When her tears finally subsided, Maribel pulled back slightly to look at him. "I've lived in fear for so long, Zeke, always looking over my shoulder, waiting for the past to catch up with me." "You don't have to run anymore," he said simply. "Not from the past, not from yourself, and certainly not from me." "What are you saying?" Zeke cupped her face in his calloused hands, his touch infinitely gentle. "I'm saying I love you, Maribel Thompson. Your past, your present, and if you'll have me, your future." Zeke, his name was barely a whisper on her lips before he kissed her, a tender meeting of mouths that quickly deepened into something more urgent. Maribel wound her arms around his neck, returning the kiss with all the longing she had suppressed for months. When they finally parted, both breathing heavily, she rested her forehead against his. "I love you too," she said simply. "More than I thought possible." He smiled then, a full, unguarded smile that transformed his face. "Then that's all that matters. The rest we'll figure out together." "What about Benjamin, your ranch? If the truth about me comes out, Benjamin already adores you." "As for the ranch, it's remote enough that news travels slowly if at all. And I have connections in the law now, legitimate ones," he added with a wry smile. "If necessary, we could leave, start fresh somewhere else, Mexico maybe, or further north." The offer to abandon everything he had built for her safety humbled her. "I won't ask that of you, Zeke. You didn't ask, I offered. This place means nothing without you in it." They stayed by the fire long into the night, planning, dreaming, and simply holding each other, sealing their newfound honesty with tender kisses and whispered promises. When Maribel finally returned to her cabin in the pre-dawn hours, it was with a lightness of spirit she hadn't felt in years. Christmas Day dawned clear and bright, the previous night's snow glistening in the winter sunshine. Benjamin woke early, his excitement infectious as they gathered around the small tree in the main house's parlor. Zeke had indeed been busy with his secret shopping, producing gifts for everyone, a fine leather-bound journal and fountain pen for Maribel, a proper saddle sized for Benjamin, and smaller tokens for Miguel and the other hands. Maribel had her own surprises, a hand-knitted sweater for Benjamin, embroidered handkerchiefs for the men, and for Zeke, a silver watch fob she had saved for weeks to purchase in town. The simple joy of giving and receiving, of being part of what felt remarkably like a family, brought tears to her eyes more than once during the day. That evening, after a festive dinner with all the ranch hands, Zeke took Maribel for a walk under the stars, their breath forming clouds in the cold air as they strolled arm in arm. "I have one more gift," he said, stopping near a large oak tree at the edge of the property. From his pocket, he produced a small velvet box. Maribel's heart skipped as he opened it to reveal a simple gold ring set with a single diamond that caught the moonlight. "It was my mother's," Zeke explained. "The only thing of value she left me." Zeke, it's beautiful, but Maribel Thompson, he interrupted, taking her hand. I know we've known each other less than a year. I know your past still haunts you and mine isn't spotless either. But I also know that I love you more than I thought possible, and I want to build a future with you. Will you marry me? Tears froze on her cheeks in the cold night air. Are you certain? Once we're married, my problems become yours. They already are, he said simply, and I'd rather face them together officially. Yes, Maribel whispered, then louder, yes, I'll marry you, Zeke Valero. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then swept her into his arms for a kiss that promised a lifetime of love and protection. As they walked back to the house, plans already forming for a simple ceremony after the new year, Maribel marveled at the journey that had brought her from terror to joy in the span of 6 months. The wedding took place on a crisp January morning in 1879, with only the ranch hands, Benjamin, and a circuit-riding preacher as witnesses. Maribel wore a new blue dress ordered specially from San Bernardino, with Zeke's turquoise hair comb securing her veil. Zeke looked uncommonly handsome in a black suit, his usually stern face softened with happiness as they spoke their vows beneath an arch of winter greenery. Benjamin stood proudly as Zeke's best man, his face beaming with approval of the union that would make the woman he had come to view as a mother officially part of his family. After the simple ceremony, the entire ranch celebrated with a feast prepared by Cookie and his helpers, followed by music and dancing that lasted well into the night. That night, as Maribel joined Zeke in what was now their shared bedroom in the main house, all nervousness fell away in the face of their deep love and trust. His hands, so strong yet infinitely gentle, explored her body with reverent care, and she learned the textures and contours of his scarred skin with eager fingers. Their lovemaking was tender at first, then passionate, a physical expression of the commitment they had made before God and their makeshift family. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, Maribel felt truly at peace for the first time in memory. I never thought I could be this happy, she murmured against his skin. Zeke's arms tightened around her. This is just the beginning, wife. I promise you a lifetime of peaceful days. And if the past comes calling, then we'll face it together. He kissed the top of her head. But for tonight, there's only us in this moment. Maribel closed her eyes, believing him with all her heart. Whatever the future held, joy or challenge, calm or storm, they would weather it side by side. Spring arrived with an explosion of wildflowers across the ranch's rolling hills. Benjamin, now tanned and confident from months of ranch life, had grown 3 inches and gained a competence with horses that would have shocked his mother. Letters arrived from Victoria in Europe, formal and distant, inquiring about his progress but showing little genuine maternal interest. One evening, as the 3 of them sat on the porch after dinner, Benjamin broached the subject that had clearly been on his mind. "Mother will be coming for me soon," he said, his tone carefully neutral. Her last letter said she'd return to America in April. Zeke and Maribel exchanged glances. They had discussed this inevitable moment privately but had wanted Benjamin to raise it first. "That's right," Zeke acknowledged. "She'll be expecting to take you back to Boston." The boy looked down at his hands. "I don't want to go, Benjamin," Maribel began gently. "No, please listen." He looked up, his young face serious beyond his years. "I've learned more here in 5 months than in all my time at that fancy school. Uncle Zeke and Miguel have taught me about horses and cattle, about responsibility and keeping your word. You've taught me reading and figures, but also about kindness and what a real family feels like." His voice wavered slightly. "Mother doesn't want me, not really. I'm just an obligation to her." Zeke leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Your mother is still your legal guardian, Benjamin. We can't simply keep you without her permission." "Then ask her," Benjamin pleaded. "Tell her I want to stay. She might agree. It would free her to travel without worry." Maribel reached out to smooth his hair. "We'll try, sweetheart. We would love nothing more than for you to stay with us, but you must be prepared for the possibility that she'll refuse." "She won't care, not really," he insisted. "Not if it doesn't reflect poorly on her reputation." His assessment was tragically accurate, Maribel thought. In the months since Victoria's departure, Benjamin had revealed enough about his childhood to paint a picture of emotional neglect masked by material privilege. While Victoria had never been physically abusive, she had treated her son as an accessory to her social standing rather than a child requiring love and nurturing. True to Benjamin's prediction, Victoria's response to Zeke's carefully worded letter came swiftly and with surprising acquiescence. She agreed that Benjamin could remain at the ranch for his education in practical matters, provided he spent summers and holidays in Boston to maintain his social connections. Reading between the lines, it was clear she welcomed the arrangement that freed her to pursue her own interests while fulfilling her maternal obligations in the most minimal way. Benjamin's joy at the news was tempered only by the requirement to return to Boston periodically, but even that couldn't dampen his enthusiasm for his permanent place at the Double V. Maribel and Zeke officially became his guardians, with the understanding that he would receive both practical ranch education and the academic learning necessary for his future. As April turned to May, life settled into a pleasant routine for the newly formed family. Benjamin divided his time between ranch work and studies. Zeke focused on expanding their cattle operation, and Maribel managed the household while starting a vegetable garden that promised to reduce their dependence on store-bought produce. It was during a trip to San Bernardino for supplies that the past finally caught up with them. Maribel had accompanied Zeke and Benjamin to town, planning to visit the dressmaker while the males handled the heavier purchases. As they walked down the main street, a voice called out behind them. "Mrs. Thompson, Maribel Thompson, is that you?" Maribel froze, her blood turning to ice at the sound of a voice she recognized from her San Francisco days. Edward Pierce, one of Lawrence's business associates. Slowly, she turned to face a portly man in an expensive suit, his florid face registering surprise and triumph. "It is you. Everyone thought you were dead after Lawrence's murder. The authorities have been searching for you for months." Zeke stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of Maribel. "I believe you're mistaken, sir. This is my wife, Maribel Valero." Pierce's eyes narrowed. "No mistake, I knew Lawrence and Maribel Thompson for years. This woman disappeared the night her husband was found shot through the heart in their parlor." He looked past Zeke to Maribel, whose face had drained of color. "The servants said you two had argued, then you vanished, along with some money and jewelry. The police have been looking for you ever since." A small crowd had begun to gather, attracted by the confrontation. Maribel felt the weight of their curious stares, saw the suspicion dawning in their eyes. Even in a frontier town like San Bernardino, murder was murder. "Mr. Pierce," she said, her voice surprisingly steady, "you of all people should know what kind of man Lawrence was." "A respected businessman and generous employer," Pierce replied stiffly. "A violent drunk who beat his wife regularly," Zeke countered, his tone dangerous. "A man who was attacking my wife with a fireplace poker when she defended herself." Pierce's face reddened further. "Preposterous. Lawrence had a temper, certainly, but he would never. He broke my arm when I tried to leave him," Maribel interrupted, stepping forward to stand beside Zeke. "The time for hiding was over. He blackened my eyes, cracked my ribs, and threatened to kill me if I ever tried to escape again. The night he died, he was drunk and violent. I shot him in self-defense after he came at me with a weapon." The gathered crowd murmured, some faces showing sympathy, others doubt. Benjamin had moved closer to Maribel, his young face fierce with protective loyalty. "These are serious allegations," came a new voice as the town sheriff pushed through the onlookers. "Madam, I'm going to have to ask you to come to my office to sort this out." Zeke's hand moved toward his gun, but Maribel placed her hand on his arm. "No, Zeke, this was always going to happen. I'll go with the sheriff." She looked at the lawman squarely. "But I want my husband and son with me." The sheriff nodded cautiously. "That's acceptable for now. Mr. Valero, I'll take your word as a respected rancher that you won't cause trouble." "My wife is innocent of murder," Zeke said firmly. "I intend to prove it through legal means." The walk to the sheriff's office was the longest of Maribel's life. Whispers followed them, speculation spreading like wildfire through the town. Inside the jailhouse, they were shown to the sheriff's private office rather than the cells, a small mercy that Maribel attributed to Zeke's standing in the community. "I'll need to send a telegram to San Francisco," the sheriff explained after hearing their basic account. "Until I receive instructions, Mrs. Valero, you'll have to remain in town. I won't lock you up, given the circumstances, but I'll need your word you won't flee." "You have it," Maribel said quietly. "We'll stay at the hotel," Zeke decided. "All three of us." The next few days passed in agonizing slowness. They took rooms at San Bernardino's best hotel, venturing out only for meals at the restaurant across the street. Zeke sent Miguel to fetch legal papers from the ranch and dispatched telegrams to contacts who might help their cause. Benjamin remained steadfastly by Maribel's side, his presence a comfort amid the uncertainty. On the third day, Sheriff Davis requested their presence at his office. When they arrived, they found not only the sheriff but also a well-dressed gentleman with a leather portfolio. "Mrs. Valero, this is Mr. James Hargrove from the San Francisco District Attorney's office," Sheriff Davis explained. "He's been investigating your husband's death." Maribel's heart sank. Had they sent someone to escort her back to San Francisco for trial? Mr. Hargrove studied her with keen eyes. "Mrs. Thompson or Valero, as you're now known, your disappearance made quite a stir in certain circles of San Francisco society." "I had no choice," Maribel replied softly, "so it seems." Hargrove opened his portfolio, removing several documents. "After your disappearance and the discovery of Mr. Thompson's body, the initial assumption was murder and theft. However, several complications arose during the investigation." "Complications?" Zeke asked sharply. "Yes." First, Mr. Thompson's household staff came forward with statements regarding his treatment of Mrs. Thompson. The housekeeper described treating numerous injuries over the years. The butler recounted instances of public humiliation and private violence. Hargrove glanced at Benjamin, then continued more delicately. There was also evidence of Mr. Thompson's involvement in less than legitimate business dealings, which emerged during the estate settlement. "Lawrence always operated in gray areas," Maribel acknowledged. "I suspected some of his wealth came from illegal activities." "More than some," Hargrove confirmed. "He was under investigation for fraud and embezzlement at the time of his death. Several of his business partners, including Mr. Pierce, who identified you, have since been charged." Understanding dawned on Maribel. "Edward Pierce recognized me because he's trying to save himself. If I'm convicted of murdering Lawrence, it diverts attention from their crimes." "Precisely. Mr. Pierce is currently out on bail awaiting trial. His credibility is questionable at best." Hargrove shuffled his papers. "Most significantly, we discovered a letter in Mr. Thompson's desk, written by you and never sent, detailing years of abuse and your fear for your life. Combined with the staff testimony and evidence of his violent character, the district attorney has determined that any reasonable jury would find you acted in self-defense." Maribel swayed slightly, Zeke's arm immediately steadying her. "Are you saying," "I'm saying, Mrs. Valero, that you are not being charged with any crime related to the death of Lawrence Thompson. The case is considered closed, justifiable homicide in self-defense." Tears sprang to Maribel's eyes as the weight of years of fear suddenly lifted. "I'm free, truly free." "You are." Hargrove closed his portfolio. "There is, however, the matter of Mr. Thompson's estate. As his widow, you are entitled to a significant inheritance once the legal claims against his business dealings are settled." "I don't want his money," Maribel said immediately. "Nevertheless, it is legally yours. I suggest you retain an attorney to represent your interests. There should be substantial assets remaining even after settlements." After Hargrove departed, Maribel sat in stunned silence, unable to fully process the enormity of what had just occurred. The nightmare that had haunted her for nearly a year was over. She was not a fugitive, not a murderer, but a woman who had survived and defended herself against a monster. "It's over," Zeke said softly, taking her hands in his. You never have to run again. Benjamin, who had remained impressively composed throughout the meeting, suddenly threw his arms around her. I knew you couldn't have done anything wrong, he declared fiercely. You're the best person I know. Maribel held him close, her heart full to bursting with love for this boy who had accepted her without question, and for the man who had offered her sanctuary and then his heart. Let's go home, she whispered, our home. The ride back to the Double V was filled with a lightness that bordered on euphoria. Maribel found herself noticing beauty she had been too burdened to fully appreciate before the wildflowers carpeting the hillsides, the majesty of the distant mountains, the perfect blue of the California sky. Even the ranch itself seemed to welcome them with new warmth as they crested the final rise and saw its familiar buildings nestled in the valley. Life gradually returned to normal, though normal now had a different quality for Maribel. Without the constant fear of discovery, she found herself laughing more freely, sleeping more soundly, and loving more openly. She and Zeke discussed what to do about the Thompson inheritance, eventually deciding to establish a trust for Benjamin's education and to use a portion to expand the ranch, with the remainder set aside for charitable causes. Summer brought Benjamin's reluctant departure for his obligatory visit to Boston. He returned 6 weeks later, taller and more confident, but with a newfound appreciation for his life at the Double V. Mother barely noticed I was there, he reported without apparent bitterness. She's engaged to an English lord now and planning to move to London after the wedding. Does that mean you won't have to return next summer? Maribel asked gently. Benjamin shook his head. She says I'm still expected for holidays, but she agreed I could stay here permanently otherwise. She'll send documents for Uncle Zeke to become my legal guardian. Zeke ruffled the boy's hair, a gesture of affection that had become commonplace between them. You'll always have a home here, Ben, no matter what. As autumn approached, Maribel discovered she was expecting a child. The news brought joy to the entire ranch, with Miguel organizing a celebration complete with Mexican delicacies and music. Zeke's reaction was a mixture of elation and protectiveness that Maribel found endearing, if occasionally stifling. I'm pregnant, not made of glass, she reminded him one evening when he insisted on carrying a basket of laundry for her. Humor me, he replied with a grin. I've never been a father before. The baby arrived in early April 1880, a healthy boy they named Thomas Michael Valero, with Zeke's dark hair and Maribel's blue eyes. Benjamin took his role as older brother seriously, proudly helping with the baby and declaring his intention to teach Thomas to ride as soon as he could sit up. As Maribel sat on the porch one golden evening, nursing her son while Zeke and Benjamin discussed the merits of different saddle designs nearby, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a prison of fear and abuse in San Francisco to freedom and love in the hills of San Bernardino. From a woman running for her life to a wife, mother, and vital part of a thriving ranch, Zeke caught her gaze and smiled, the expression still rare enough to make her heart skip. In that smile was everything she had ever wanted: acceptance, respect, partnership, and deep, abiding love. He had promised her a peaceful future when she was still running from a violent past, and against all odds, he had kept that promise. What are you thinking about so seriously? He asked, coming to sit beside her. Maribel smiled down at their sleeping son, then up at the man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved. I'm thinking that some journeys, no matter how difficult, lead us exactly where we're meant to be. Zeke's arm slipped around her shoulders, drawing her and the baby closer. And where is that, Mrs. Valero? Home, she said simply. Home and peace at last. The years passed with the rhythm of seasons on the Double V Ranch. Thomas grew from an infant to a sturdy toddler, joined 2 years later by a sister, Eliza Rose. Benjamin, after completing his education with a combination of ranch learning and formal schooling arranged by Maribel, chose to remain at the Double V rather than pursue opportunities in the East. By the time he was 20, he was effectively managing large portions of the ranch operations, allowing Zeke more time with his growing family. Victoria eventually married her English lord and settled in London, her visits to America becoming increasingly rare. Her relationship with Benjamin remained formal and distant, but the boy-turned-man no longer sought her approval, having found his true family in the Valeros. The Thompson inheritance, wisely invested, allowed the Double V to expand its operations and weather the economic challenges that affected many ranches in the changing West. Maribel used a portion to establish a small school on the property, initially for their children and those of the ranch hands, but eventually serving neighboring families as well. Her experiences gave her a special compassion for women in difficult situations, and more than once, the Double V became a temporary refuge for someone escaping abuse or hardship. Zeke's past as an outlaw occasionally resurfaced in rumors or whispers, but his standing as a respected rancher and family man eventually overshadowed the youthful mistakes he had long since atoned for. Similarly, the truth about Maribel's first marriage and its violent end became a known but rarely mentioned fact in San Bernardino society. Time and her obvious happiness with Zeke had turned potential scandal into something closer to a frontier romance, the story of a brave woman who escaped a monster and found true love in the California hills. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1899, with their children nearly grown and the Double V prosperous beyond their early dreams, Zeke took Maribel back to the oak tree where he had proposed. The tree was larger now, their love deeper, their lives richer for all they had experienced together. "Any regrets?" he asked, his dark hair now threaded with silver but his gray eyes still intense as they gazed into hers. Maribel, her beauty matured but undiminished by the years, shook her head. "Not one. Every step, even the painful ones, led me to you and this life we've built." She reached up to touch his face, tracing the lines that years of sun and laughter had etched there. "You promised me peace, Zeke Valero, and you kept that promise." He caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "And you promised to love me through better or worse." "I'd say we've had far more better than worse." "Far more," she agreed, leaning into his embrace as the setting sun painted the hills in gold and purple, "and many more years to come." As twilight deepened into night, they walked hand in hand back toward the lights of home, where their children and the future they had built together awaited. Behind them, stretching into the darkness, lay the shadows of their pasts not forgotten, but no longer threatening. Ahead lay only the peace they had found together, a peace that had been hard-won, but was all the more precious for the journey it had required. For Maribel Thompson Valero, who had once fled in terror through the California night, that peace was the greatest treasure of all, the gift of a man who had seen her strength when she felt only weakness, who had offered sanctuary when she needed it most, and whose love had transformed a desperate escape into a journey home.